again. So we are here to talk about the major review of the Aggregate Offshore record today. And today's session will be focused on Northern Ireland and Scotland perspective. So a couple of bits of housekeeping that Katie will have mentioned some of these already. You're all muted. We will keep the questions anonymous unless you particularly raise your hand whilst we're reading out the question and you want to kind of chip in with some more information. But we will have to unmute you if you want to do that. So you can raise your hand and we can do that. Session will be recorded. We will also be sharing the slides from this event as well. And we will publish the question and answers when we publish all of that together. So if we either can't answer a question today or you just want to have it written down, they will all be there. We've done the same, or will be doing the same, for the England-Wales one on Wednesday as well. So all of it will be published together and you can see what we said for both sessions. So Katie said, please use the question box when you're there. The presentation took about 20 minutes, half an hour, I think, today. And then we'll address questions at the end. I'm going to do it that way just so that I can focus on the slides and then we'll kind of address any questions. I can always leave them up and we can go back to the slides if we need to. We will take some comfort breaks depending on how many questions and how long we go on for, so don't worry about that. Okay, I will get into the slides then. So, where are we with the major review? What I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to turn my camera off so that these slides are bigger. And Gordon, maybe if you turn your camera off as well, just so we can make them really big for everyone and you're not just watching me kind of gesturing on the camera. So hopefully that'll make it brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so yes, where are we in the review? So we have established our priorities and we've talked to statutory customers to find out what we require. And we spent a number of months doing that at the end of last year. We now have the consultation out. It's been out for about a month now. We've got another 2 months to go. And we're running these sessions this week just to help talk people through what are in the proposals and give you a chance to ask any questions now before you send your response into the consultation. Once that responses all come in, we'll do our usual analysis activities and we'll write up a summary of the responses. And from that, we will then work with statutory customers to decide what we're actually going to publish as the outcomes. Looking through all the timescales of that, I think it means, therefore, the notification of changes, which will be the official announcement for the 25-26 changes, is probably going to be, could be the end of this year, the very end of this year, but it's more likely to be kind of January next year. So we've put on the slides here, it will be Q1 of next year. In terms of what we're doing in the review, so we've been wanting to do this review for a while. We just started it off and then lockdown happened. So obviously that got paused. There were more important things. So we've known that we wanted to do this quite a while. There's gaps in the data and we wanted to improve that. Now, this is the only slide I'm really going to mention England and Wales, but just to make sure everyone is aware of what's happening across the UK. So for England and Wales, the consultation is for TNE data to become individualised. So their consultation is around joining the student record for TNE students. But for Northern Ireland and Scotland, the need is only to increase the data we've got in the aggregate record. So the proposals for these are to increase AOR. For both of those, the changes will happen for 25-26. There is a question about how many times a year that is. For AOR, we currently have it once a year. Particularly for England and Wales, when that joins the student record, that could be twice a year to match with the student record timescales, or it could be once a year. And then that obviously has a knock-on impact for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Assuming we want to try and keep a UK picture of when that data is coming in, maybe we want to do the same here. So there are genuine questions and data burden questions around when providers think they could return it and when they would prefer to return that to us. And based on that, then we will work out how many times a year this will be collected. One of the biggest things that people have been highlighting to us over the years is that the type field doesn't work. There's crossovers, it doesn't cover everything. So one of the things that we had on our list right at the top was that type needed to be given a massive overhaul. So we've done a big bit of work for that as well. I'm just including a note on here just so that Scotland and Northern Ireland are aware here that there is a different, an extra bit, in the consultation for England and Wales. They also have an expansion to the student record coverage. So when they're talking about things like partnership data and expansion to the student record, that's just to make you aware that that's something that they have in their consultation that is not in your consultation. So that's generally what the review is doing. We have our usual regulatory justifications as to the reasons for collecting these data. But more generally, why we're doing this, we don't have the requirement for individualised data in Northern Ireland and Scotland, but we are definitely interested in improving the level of detail that we're collecting and therefore what we can do with that TNE data. Now, because there's no requirement from either of the funding councils for that, the consultation in Northern Ireland and Scotland is just about improving aggregate offshore record. But we know from talking to some providers in those countries that actually they might prefer to match an individualised level of detail on a kind of optional basis. Like they would prefer to do it that way so that it was parity across the UK. So we are giving you the chance to respond on that if you wanted to. There's absolutely no necessity to do that. So you're only required to respond to the aggregate side, but we're giving you the option so that if you really wanted to, then you can. And that's also why we're sharing all of these recordings to everyone. So you can go back and have a look at the individualised consultation recording and question and answers if you wanted to look up on that. So that's generally about the review. Now let's talk about what data items are in there. So we'll start with the type, then the big bit of work everyone's been asking us to do for quite a while now. We looked at a number of different frameworks and ways that people have classified it over the years. And the one that kind of fitted what we needed better was the British Council classification. So we started off at that and kind of adapted it to our model to make that work. Whilst we were going through that ourselves, we were actually drawing out scenarios and examples to help us understand this and make sure that we'd covered everything. And we thought whilst we were doing that, actually that's probably a helpful thing to show providers in the sector to make sure that we have understood that correctly. Do we understand what we're talking about in terms of how we've classified that? Does that fit what's happening in providers? So we thought, yeah, that's an extra kind of bit that's published alongside the consultation to hopefully help you see where we've gone with that as well. And what we've tried to do is show how we think those things would be classified and how they would be coded in these new fields to help you to work out where your provision might fit into that. Because we appreciate some of the terms we might use, you might use different terms, but we've tried to spell out in a way that you should be able to see kind of where your provision fits in that. And I'd be really interested to see if that is helpful, actually. It's a new thing we've done. We've got little videos as well, I'll show you in a bit later, to kind of step through that. It's not something we've done before, and I'd be really interested in your feedback actually as to whether that's been helpful, because we might do that again, and we might actually try and publish that in the guidance as well if that genuinely is helpful for providers. So in the consultation, we not only show that with you and show where our thinking has gone on that, but there's a question there to make sure that we have actually identified all the different types and the variety of provision that exists out there. Just in case there are any gaps in there, we kind of want to know about that now so that we can make sure it does fit in with all the rest of the fields that we think it should do now. So it gives you a chance there to say, actually, I've got this provision and it doesn't seem to fit in one of these scenarios. So in terms of what that means, on the next slide, I'll show you the two breakdowns, but there are two fields that makes up this replacement for type. For Northern Ireland and Scotland, that will be two new fields, one called programme type and one called venue type. Now, just for completeness, so that you're aware, in England and Wales, they have those two fields in a similar place in the student record, but they're not actually required at the moment to do it. In their consultation, OFS and HEFQ think they can do that through a derivation. We've shown the derivation to people so they can make a judgment, and so there's a question in there about whether optionally they would like to do various things. Some can be mandatory, some could be optional, some could just be the derivation. So yes, just so that you're aware, they are considered a little bit differently across the four countries. So what are they? These are the two fields. We've got programme type on the left there, the different types of programme, and then the venue, so where all the location things are happening on the second field. that is where we've got to. And on the scenario page I mentioned, where we've gone through all the different ones we've seen, there are also definitions in there as well. Oh, here we go. These are the scenarios. Got ahead of myself there. So yeah, these are the 9 scenarios that we've got online, and the web address is at the bottom there if you want to see it. And when you expand those, we've got all the videos underneath those. So those are the type field stuff. Now looking at the specific areas in the AOR. Here, sorry, too quick. There is a model. We've got this as an extra PDF, so if you want to print this off and kind of use this alongside while you're looking at things, this is a similar thing that we've done in the Data Futures program, for those of you who've seen those, where we've kind of drawn out the fields and we've color-coded them in terms of whether they've changed or moved or they're brand new fields. So you can kind of see at a glance here that the blue represents, the blue circles represent a new field. There's quite a lot here to get that expansion and to get that better level of data that we need for AOR going forward. The orange ones are where they kind of move place. So the 2 type fields I've kind of said moved because they're replacing type. So type was there, but these are different ones. And then there's only 2 fields there that actually remained unchanged, so the country and the Instacamp field. So there is overall model. So stepping through each individual ones of those. New data items. So we have a registration status field, which is kind of a flag to say that your provider is doing one of those things, so registering and awarding, or just awarding. And we've got a delivery status flag as well. So again, whether you're delivering all of the teaching or some of the teaching. It doesn't need you to specify any more than what your provider is doing with that. With some of the others, England and Wales one, we've got who is actually doing that. Don't need that for Northern Ireland and Scotland. This is just a flag to say this is the level that your provider is doing. And here's the fields. So yeah, this would be the new field on the course entity to understand the relationships that providers have with their students. And the delivery status one as well. There's a quick note on this one that we are expecting the courses that are kind of being returned as a course in the AOR, that the arrangements will probably be the same for students on those courses. So again, keen to hear feedback on whether you think that is correct in a consultation. So distance learning. So we've got a new thing around venue type. So this is where the field is going to be put for that, and one of the fields in there is distance learning. And so this is how we would be able to identify that within the AOR record. So that a student is studying via distance learning. So it's the 4th value in the new venue type field. We'll get the country of where they are located, and then the fact that they are studying by distance learning in the new field. Venue name. So we've got this in a few places here and a few places in the England and Wales one where we've added names into organisations. In the student record, we had things like UKPRN. We obviously can't use that because it's not in the UK. So what we've gone with is name a field and a free text field for you to fill out. We would really like over time for the providers that are using the same kind of venues to use the same names in here, but we appreciate we can't really mandate that. That would be quite difficult to do. So for now, we've got the free text field for you to fill out in terms of how you would refer to these organisations. Subject. So we want to collect subject in AOR. That's a bit of data that has been missing that is now required. So we're going to have a similar entity that we would in the student record in terms of collecting a subject and then a proportion to that subject. Now, when we were going through this, we realised that to do a qualification subject kind of means we're creating a course entity, because that's the level of detail that you're kind of collecting there. So to do this, we've created a new course entity, as it says at the top. So there will be 2 overarching entities in AOR now, the provision one that exists now, and this course one, which will have qualification subject underneath. And that is what it will look like. Very similar to the subject entities we will be used to in the student record. So replacing the type field then, so I have mentioned venue type because of distance learning here, but just for completeness, this is where we will put the two type replacement fields. So program type on course, and the venue type will be on provision. And it's a combination of these two fields that kind of gives us that richer picture about where what providers are doing and where things are happening and what the arrangements are. Headcounts. Now we do have actually some headcount fields in the AOR now, but they are for England and Wales. So with England and Wales coming out of AOR, we have come with some kind of replacement ones because they're slightly different for Northern Ireland and Scotland that are remaining in AOR. So we've got counts of students who are continuing study, or I should do the other round, shouldn't I? They're starting study, and they're continuing study, and then they're successfully completing. They are just a head count, so it is still remaining aggregate form of that. And in the consultation itself, we've given some examples about where we think students would fit into this. So particularly like if they've got dormant or something, where they'd fit in with that, to try and demonstrate how we thought this would work. So yes, here we go. There's the field itself. There'll be integer counts similar to what we've got now, because we've just got one overall arching head count now. And that'll help us understand how students are progressing through their courses, or not, as the case may be. So looking at the existing items that are there. So this is where we kind of get up to. So the bold ones that have got a little star new, they're the new fields. The other ones are not new fields. So for course, as I said, just the level field will be remaining there in terms of what they've done. And we've got the new qualification subject entity underneath. And then we've got the provision entity, which is still there. So country and Instacamp are the ones that are remaining. All the rest of the ones are new. So just addressing a couple of the other questions we have in the consultation. So aggregate versus combined. So as I said, there isn't a requirement from funders to have individualized data, but we would like to seek providers' view on whether that is something that they would prefer to do or not. So there is a question there for you to identify that and write any comments you want for us to consider in that. We have asked the question about what would happen if it was half and half, and I think, and Gordon can disagree with me later if he wants to, but I think generally we'd gone with the principle if it wasn't for everyone, it wouldn't be useful because we wouldn't be able to use it if it was half and half. So that's our thinking at the moment, but we'll see what the comments kind of are when they come in and make a decision then. Timing of the return. So I've briefly mentioned this one at the beginning. There is genuine question about whether once or twice a year is easier or better or preferred by providers. There isn't a definite decision by statutory customers yet on this one, so genuinely comments will help us make a decision on the way forward on this. So if it's once a year, it will be covering a similar period as it is now in AOR, so 1st of August to 31st of July. If it's twice a year, then it will probably be fitting with the student record timescale. So there are the reference period dates for that. So 1st of August to the 1st of December, and then the 2nd of December to the following 31st of July. UK-wide approach. Because of some of the comments we'd got as we were working through the consultation, particularly that statement there about how important providers felt it was to keep that UK-wide approach, what would happen if there were two different records. We thought it was a good idea to give you an option to respond explicitly on this one. So there's the agree or disagree level question here, and then we've got a text box for you to explain anything you want to tell us about that. So going through a couple of links that we've got. So there's the main review page. I will flick over to the web page in a minute and I'll just go through these in person. But these are the ones we've got. So we've got the main page. We've got information about the project and the project mandate on there if you want to have a look at the reasons behind starting the review. And the consultation links itself. So there's the two for depending on which country you're responding on. We are also accepting views from the sector as well. I'm aware that particular sector groups want to respond as a sector group, and if any software suppliers also want to respond, we will take responses from anyone for this. And there is our supporting definitions and scenarios, and I will definitely skip through and show you the page on that one because it'll be easier to see on the actual page. On the consultation itself, in terms of information we're giving you, so the consultation text is being made as a PDF. So if you want to kind of print that off and go away and answer the questions before filling it in, that PDF is there. People have asked us if we could make it a Word document, and I'll be completely honest, what we've had to do is take a PDF from the system. It's not possible to make that as a Word document doing it like that, and some of the spacing goes a bit funny because of the way it kind of formats, but at least it's something for you that can be printed off. So that's available there. The definition and scenarios, that's a link through to the page that I'm going to show you in a second. And then there's the PDF of that actual data model picture as well. So if that is helpful to print off and use, then you can do so. I certainly do that myself, and I've been doing a lot of the data features and student record questions. So I think that's it. Yes, so what I'm going to do is show you the web page. Is that showing? Yes, awesome. So this is the main review page. That's the main link on the first thing I showed you. Right at the top here, these are the links to the 2 consultations. So is the one that you will need. We have project mandate information on here and all of the background and things that we've got there. And it's these links at the bottom that will take you through. So the top one kind of repeats the project mandate and the steering group and the timescales that we've got on this. The second one just links you through to the consultation links. So that's this one there. And then if I go back one, the bottom one is the one that takes you to the definitions and scenarios. So here is explanation about how what we were doing in the review and how we got to the answer we got to. So I'll skip past that. You can have a read of that when you've looked at the link. And here are the definitions. So we've got the individualised ones for England, Wales and student, and we've got the aggregate ones for Northern Ireland and Scotland in AOR. So here are all the fields that we've got. When you had a chance to read through, do let us know if that makes sense. And then at the bottom, we've got the scenario. So here are the 9. If I just click on the first one, here is a little video. So I won't play it because it probably won't work anyway on my thing. I've not shared the right screen, but that takes you through kind of roughly where we think the student's moving around and where they are. And hopefully that will help you identify whether or not the scenario is relevant to a course or provision at your provider. And underneath here is where we try to spell out all of the fields in terms of the new fields and the changes and how we think they would fit into that. And again, very keen to know whether you agree with that. I think that's it, repeated for each of the scenarios, yes. Okay, I will stop flicking around. We will go back to the presentation. Yes. Yes, okay, so we have actually only been half an hour, so we have got some time for questions. What I might do is just pause there for a couple of minutes and give people a chance to write up any questions they've got. I'll just fill out the sharing screens and then we'll launch into the questions, I think, if everyone's happy with that. Okay, folks, we have a couple of questions in here. Shall I start through in case anyone's still typing up their question? Got any more? Feel free to add them in. Okay, first question then. Whilst you say that Scotland and Northern Ireland can provide feedback on the England and Wales model if we were to aim for UK-wide parity, is the converse true in that England and Wales might opt to contribute to this consultation and aim for maintaining an aggregate return? So they could respond to this consultation, but there is a requirement for individualised data in England and Wales. So if they were to do that, I don't think OFS and HEFQ would ever agree to come back into the AOR. I think they're already decided that they need individualised data. So we've kind of not really suggested it the other way around to England and Wales just for that reason, because we kind of feel like it would in some ways be wasting their time responding. They're happy to do that if they want to respond and give that kind of UK-wide approach, very happy to contribute to that. But in terms of the data items that would be submitted and needed, because of that requirement is there, it's kind of a little bit, we felt it would be wasting people's time really to kind of get them to respond to that as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Next question, are program type and provision type the same thing? The language changes throughout. Just trying to think where we have done that. I'm going to have to go and look through the consultation after this. I think we are talking about the same thing, I suspect. In terms of the field, it's very definitely called program type. That's what we want to go to. I guess in terms of the way we were trying to explain that to people, maybe we've slipped into provision type, but I think, yeah, I suspect the places we've done that is going to be the same thing. If the person who put that in wants to shout up and tell me where I've put it, I can probably answer in a bit more detail, but I think generally we probably meant the same thing with that. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have, folks. We can hang around for a few minutes, but if you haven't got any more questions, you're very welcome to end here. I don't want to make you all sit here for another half an hour just waiting for someone to think of a question to keep me talking. So we'll, for anyone watching the recording and anyone here today that thinks of a question later, do feel free to email Liaison in. I'm sure they will get passed across to us or answered for you. But otherwise, thank you very much for coming. And hopefully this was helpful. We've got one more question. I will answer this so that it's still on the recording. What impact do you expect on the student return as some of the fields are already in use but slightly different in that return, e.g. course role? So what we tried to do when we were coming up with the AOR expansion fields is make them in a way that they could be comparable. So we don't expect to change any of the student fields based on that, unless that's in the consultation to change it for this consultation. We've done it on a way that they could at least be comparable. Yes, one's individualized, one's aggregate, so there will be some level where that won't work, but we have tried to do that where we can, so at least some level of data can be there. So for example, like the subject, now there's some subject in there. Yes, you probably can't get individualized data from that in AOR, so there'll be a bit of a difference in terms of what we will get from that, but we've tried where we can to get at least some parity so that some analysis can be done across the two. But if there's anything in particular you're worried about that, do feel free to put it in the consultation and we will make sure that we've addressed that. Another question, we've got a couple more coming in now. So is it a single response per institution or response per type of role at institution? So the general case approach to these type of consultations is that we would prefer one response per provider. But we appreciate there might be some with different values. So we stole the OFS's question right at the beginning, which allows you to say this is the response for my provider. So this is the general consensus, but actually I've got a specific role and I want to add something else in that maybe isn't coming from my provider and it's coming from me personally. You can respond as an individual. So you can do both. If we get multiple ones from providers, I tend to, I'm afraid, send those people an email and ask which is the one that should be taken as a provider response. But yeah, as I said, we've put that question in there to give you the option if you want to add more things in. Another question. Also, what onward use do you expect with venue name if we cannot get consistency across the sector? Yes, this is something we discussed about onward use and how that was going to happen. And I think there weren't any better options, I think is the, the easiest way to explain this. There is no identifier across the country. We couldn't come up with, different ones for every single country that was there, depending on what identifiers they have. So whatever's the UKPRN equivalent, that isn't just going to be possible to maintain. So we've gone with venue name, which we know like from Unistats, they have like free text names that are published. That isn't the best, and it may not work, but we're going to have to try it and see what happens and see what analysis we can do. I suspect a similar thing might happen as happens in Unistats, where over time we might get some validation within that free text field about what you put in there, but we haven't really talked that through. That's just a guessing at the moment. So yeah, we know that could make it difficult, but that's the best of the worst options, I suppose, that we discussed and thought was actually realistic to ask from providers. Okay, I think that's it now. Those are the extra questions. Thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully that was helpful.